with me. So today I want to give another lesson on the tarot, but not a tarot reading kind of video. Some information about the tarot that many of us don't actually know. Like if you think about the tarot deck, people think of it as a divination tool, strictly as a divination tool for, determining where you are in life or trying to predict your future. And while, yes, the tarot deck is used that way, the origin of the tarot deck is much deeper and more esoteric than that. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So, I've said we're going to go deeper down the rabbit hole into metaphysics and spirituality and that sort of thing. So, I want to talk about the tarot in terms of its use in the esoteric uh, mystery schools, the schools of magic, where one would have to get initiated in order to best understand the tarot deck. So I'll be using the very common Rider Waite Smith deck, right? I made another video about Pamela Coleman Smith when I talked about, a woman of color and her influence on this probably most famous tarot deck in all the world. But few people know about Pamela Coleman Smith as this woman of color she's mixed race, British and Jamaican. Today's world we call her black, right? Because one drop rule and all that. But in truth, she was biracial or multiracial. And she was the woman who is responsible for, I don't even have her whole deck here with me. I have a few of the cards. She is the woman responsible for providing the artwork for this deck that became, world famous basically, but few people know about her. So again, I just got to give a shout out, like pour verbal libations for our sister Pamela Coleman Smith if I'm going to talk about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. You'll find a lot of readers now are actually trying to be inclusive enough and say Rider-Waite-Smith. And so when you hear it called Rider-Waite-Smith, it's that's the reason. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about understanding that the tarot deck itself was used as a tool to help people in their initiation process to self-awareness and higher spiritual knowledge, really awakening. How does one spiritually awaken? How does one grow or expand in their own understanding of who they are as a spiritual being having a human experience? So we know in previous centuries, people would go to a certain order to get initiated into certain secret societies, into the mystery schools, into magical societies like the Order of the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucians. Now we know centuries before that, the Greeks and Romans went to study with the Egyptians, or they plugged into the ancient African Kemetic tradition of divination, right? And those mystery schools. So when we find the European version of it later on, like the 1800s with the Order of the Golden Dawn, when we find the European versions of things, we know that most likely that tradition, that wisdom tradition, that spiritual teaching came out of the Kemetic African context. So because of that, as I talk about the hoodoo. As I talk about the tarot, I'm also going to refer to the Hoodoo Tarot deck because I want to, also, give a shout out to Tiana Lee McQuiller, who has created this deck called the Hoodoo Tarot. And y'all know I mentioned this before too. I gave away a deck, maybe a year ago or so at this point. But just to sort of, give a parallel to what the figures look like in her deck as opposed to what Pamela Coleman Smith created with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Okay, so where am I going with this? So I want to just give us a look at the first few cards of tarot to help us understand the initiation or the journey to self that the tarot really represents. Right? So in the tarot deck, you've got the major arcana and you've got the minor arcana cards, right, representing the full deck of the tarot. The major arcana are those that typically, if you get those in a reading, they are typically understood to talk about a major transition or something, a major theme in your life that's going on. Uh, yeah, the broad strokes, the big important things that are going on in your life. The minor arcana are those cards that give details, like, those kind of add the particularity, the day-to-day routines, the day-to-day details of our lives. But the major arcana let us know our themes and our big transitions coming our way, or that we've just gone through, as we use the cards to kind of understand where we are, if we're just getting strictly divination. But when we think deeper about what these cards were a reflection of, these cards were a reflection of the individual and collective um, higher consciousness, awakening to higher consciousness. And so they give a very clear representation of the hero's journey, if you will, really the fool's journey, right? So to look at the card itself, right? Let's look at the first card of the tarot deck, right? It's number 0. It's the Fool card. That was Pamela Coleman Smith's version. If you want to look at the Hoodoo Tarot deck, it's the Free Man. So what, if you're looking at the tarot in terms of a representation of a person's spiritual awakening or spiritual journey, how then do we understand the Fool card, right? So the Fool is off on a journey. If you just look at the card, here is someone, looks like a youth, off on a journey, right? And the term fool is kind of like an innocent, a certain kind of naivete, but not necessarily bad. And we use the term fool in a way to suggest that someone is, foolish, or they don't know anything, they're, dumb or something. But it's not that when you're looking at the card and the deck as part of your initiation, part of what it is to be a human being, part of what it is to be a spiritual being having a human experience, right? So we see the Fool as the embodiment of the spirit coming into the human, into the flesh, and about to step off the cliff, right? About to step off into what appears to be the unknown, but looking rather carefree and happy about it, right? Looking up to the sun, looking up to the sky, like, recognizing from whence my help comes, recognizing that I've descended from spirit into the physical, and now I'm off and running, right? The journey is about to go. The game is afoot, right? Let's go. So you can think of the Fool card as that the novice in the if you were going to get initiated in something like the Order of the Golden Dawn, or whatever order you were going to become an initiate of, you start, as at the level of a novice, right? And you have to, or an apprentice. You have to study and you have to grow, which is why I made a video too about the necessity of a mentor. And how important it is to have a mentor, because when you're this kind of carefree, some stuff can happen, right? You're going to go off the deep end. Are you going to go off the deep end and fall, or are you going to go off the deep end and just, something else will fall under your feet, right? You're still being guided because you're aware that you are spirit descended into flesh and that you're off and running. So you're not afraid, but it still helps to have some good guidance as you go. So, and again, if we look at it in the Hoodoo Tarot deck, the free man. Now here it's depicted as, a person walking away from a tomb, right? With some of the dirt. You might say, well, he's got a jar. It looks like maybe an urn even. Taking something on the journey, leaving behind the plantation, leaving behind the old ways. The gate is open, and he's clearly on his way out the gate. Where's he going? Right? He's going on a trip. So again, if you're being initiated, you are coming into the understanding that you are often running on a trip. This whole life journey that we're on as human beings is as a spiritual being having this human experience for the purpose really of remembering and waking up. And so you can't really have the full experience until you wake up, right? Otherwise, if you never wake up, you feel a victim of things, right? You feel like life happens to you, right? You feel like you don't have any agency, you don't have any power. You can't, you're locked in by circumstances. But when you awaken, you begin to realize the matrix that we're in, for one thing, right? As I mentioned before, we are in the matrix and we have the option to take the red pill or the blue pill. And depending on which pill you take, you will either stay asleep, right? You'll stay in the tomb, or you'll stay on the plantation, so to speak. You won't be ready for your trip. You won't go off. You won't take the next step because you're asleep within the matrix. But the journey represented in the tarot is we as humans are off on this journey. And this is the experience we're going to have. Okay, so if you're ready to go, what do you need? You need something, right? You need some tools. Now he's got, he or she, the human being, has a satchel. So there's some things in that satchel. What's in there? What are you getting ready to go off and do? Well, then we're going to go on to the next card in the deck, which is the Magician card. Number 1, the first card of the deck. So what was in that satchel? Here are all your tools. You see here he's got a wand, he's got a sword, he's got a wand. Let me look at this. Pentacle, cup. He's got everything he needs. He's got the infinity sign above his head, right? All is possible. And he's drawing down power from the universe, pointing down onto the earth, right? Drawing down divine power into the human or into the earthly realm. All right, see that? Understanding your power. The Magician card is about understanding that you have the tools, we have the tools we need for this journey. Of course, we often think we don't. We often feel ourselves to be powerless, which is why we become asleep in the matrix. And we're reacting all the time. We're in reactive mode, and we're not in proactive mode. We're not in our power. We're not practicing magic. Magic requires, remember, intention and a certain ability to assert one's will onto the material world, which is what he has power to do, right? Pulling down from the divine and exercising that power on the material level. So the Magician is a representation to say, you have the tools that you need. All right, so let's look at it in the Hoodoo Tarot deck, and this is Black Herman. Black Herman was an actual person. You could Google Black Herman. I won't really have time to go into who Black Herman really was, but a very famous African-American, magician, right? And that's magic with a C, M-A-G-I-C. M-A-G-I-C-K tends to refer to, the magic that I teach, right? The hoodoo, right? Or ceremonial magic. But magic, M-A-G-I-C, usually refers to sort of the illusion. If you go to a magic show and you see a magician going through different kinds of illusions, the show of it, right? So here's Black Herman, again, a magician with all of the tools that he needs at his hand. and he knows what to do with them. Black Herman was somebody who was a masterful magician, right? A masterful illusionist slash magician who knew that he had the power to affect change. And so that's what we, in terms of our understanding that we're spiritual, having a human experience and being on our journey to self-awakening, to self-awareness, we have to know that we are not powerless. So in the tarot deck, we are reminded you have the tools. You also have the ability to call forth the divine and make it so, incarnate it in flesh the way you want it to be. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the whole deck, y'all. Just covering a few. The first three, and so the third one here, which is card number 2, because remember we started with 0, the Fool is 0. But now, the second card of the major arcana is the High Priestess. Right? So now that you have your tools, and the goal is to know what to do with your tools, what if you say, I'm not sure what's the best way to use my tools. So I know there's a lot of different ways I could use my tools, but are those things, is that the best way to use my tools? So how do you ever know what's the best way? Well, the High Priestess represents going on the inward journey, going within, using your own intuition, your intuitive powers. The High Priestess represents the inner world. Going within so that you get the wisdom for how to use your tools, right? Another thing I would point out about this depiction of the High Priestess is that she has the horns of the Egyptian goddess Hathor, right? See the crown on her head, and see down here the horns. Now, remember when Beyonce wore that, her Black is King videos, people were all upset. A lot of Christians were very upset because they said that it has something, it's something satanic that she had these horns. Because see, that's people who are asleep. When you're asleep, you will look at this imagery and you will think that these things are demonic, or that somehow or another these things, you should be afraid of them. But when you're awake or awakening, you recognize your tools and your power. Sorry about the glare coming in here. The sun is coming in the window, giving me a little bit of a glare. Right? When you're awake, you begin to understand that you have the tools and you know how to use them, because you are taking the time to go within and pay attention to how the divine is speaking to you, right? And so, as I was saying about the Egyptian influence here is clear. So when I say like this, this deck came about, in the 1800s in, Europe, still. And Pamela Coleman Smith was somebody who was a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn, a magical society, right? Still, they and she understood the importance of that Egyptian connection, that Kemetic African tradition. All right, so here it is represented. The way she depicted the High Priestess, she represented Africa in here. Okay. And then in the Hoodoo deck, it's represented by Miss Ida. Right, if you can see that. Miss Ida is represented, this is a little girl in a room, in an attic. Oh, I'm getting a little notification on my phone here. Sorry about that. If you could hear that ringing. Miss Ida is a little girl, and she's represented as being in the attic, like in the upper room, right? If you remember from the Bible, going into the upper room or going into your own upper room, which means higher in consciousness, right? And there are all of these candles that are burning, right? And it could be a scary place for her to be up here in the attic all by herself, but she's not afraid because she knows who she is and she knows her power, right? She's cool, calm, and collected. If y'all don't have this Hoodoo Tarot, please go get it. You can get it from Amazon, or you could get it from her website, Tiana Lee McQuiller. So anyway, though, I'm just going to give you those few because here we are at 20 minutes already. So what I gave you was the Fool, the awakened person who's aware and off for the journey, the Magician who understands his or her power, comes from the divine. I have the ability to take divine power and make it so, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? And then if I ever do get off track, how do I know exactly how to use my particular set of tools? I go within, right? So I'm going to stop it there. That's just an example of how else we can think about the tarot deck, how else we can think about systems of magic and divination. They're not just surface, right? You can always take things on a level of surface, but what happens when you go deeper down the rabbit hole? When you start looking, behind the metaphysical curtain, is you find a world of wisdom and knowledge, right? And a lot of times it came straight out of Africa. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Leave your comments there. Long haul team, let you know. I'm sorry, it's so long. But I appreciate y'all in the long haul team. Let's see what else I got going. That's all. I'm going to wrap it up here. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. All right, bye for now.